Today I'm going to be going over how to install a differential drop kit in a 2007 FJ Cruiser, and I'm going to be talking about why you would want to do that. As I said, this is a 2007 FJ Cruiser and I need to install a differential drop kit. The reason you would want to install the differential drop kit is whenever you lift, like my FJ, the front has a 4-inch lift, the rear has a 2.5 inch lift. So on the front is the main thing that I'm concerned about, because when you lift the vehicle, it puts more stress on the CV joints. 2 inches is probably fine if it's like a lift leveling kit. It's still safe to do it. But if you have like a 4-inch lift or even a 3-inch lift, you'll start to get a little leakage on your half shafts coming out of the differential. So lowering that, which just involves putting spacers between the mounting surface on this where the front brackets are on that differential. Now this is a Toytech Diff drop kit, and it fits, as you can see on the instructions that I have printed out here, it fits a 2005 plus Tacomas, 2007 plus FJ Cruisers, and then the 03 plus 4Runners. And to my knowledge, you can follow this video for either one of those vehicles. Now what I've done already is I've removed the skid plates, which required using a 12mm. I removed the rear skid plate and I removed the front skid plate. Other tools I'm going to need, I have a 19mm wrench here that I'm going to use on the top of the nut. I'm replacing this bolt, but the bolt that this bolt is replacing, the top of that is 19mm, and also the nut on this, so the nut on top of the factory bolt is 19mm, and also the nut that's in this package for the Toytech kit is also 19mm. Bottom of this is 19mm as well. So the factory bolts are 22mm, so you will need a 22mm socket. You can use a 7/8. I have a 7/8 6-point that I'm going to use instead of my 22mm 12-point, because I can't find the 22mm 6-point. The 7/8 one comes out to 22.23, I believe. So when you use a 7/8 on a 22mm, if you can get it to fit, then you can use that instead. You want to reuse the factory washers that come off whenever you drop the differential, and you're going to have some kind of a lift, something to support it, or get a buddy of yours to hold up the differential whenever you drop it, put the spacers and everything in, and then have that put back in place. So all I have my jack stand here for is just setting the camera on, so that's the position that I will have the camera in while I'm going to be doing this. And I'm going to time lapse a lot of it whenever I'm loosening the differential, jacking everything up, lowering it, and putting everything in place. Everything that comes with this kit, you have this, so this is the spacer that actually goes on the differential, and the nut for the top of this bolt is in this package, and that washer right there goes in between the nut that goes on top of this and that mounting area on that little part of the subframe. And then these spacers and bolts are for your skid plate, because you do have to lower your skid plate a little bit. And what I'm going to do with mine is I'm actually going to put, I'm not going to video this because it's pretty simple, but whenever I put my skid plate back on, I'm going to have some silicone gasket maker stuff. I'm just going to goop that on the surface areas, so that I don't need anybody to help me whenever I take off my skid plate again. And the reason I'm using silicone gasket maker and not JB Weld or something like that is because silicone gasket maker you can take right off. It'll stick when it needs to stick, and it'll come off when you want it to come off. This comes with these bolts, which I'm hoping are stainless steel, because I don't want them to rust. So that's everything that's in the package, all these little washers and everything. And let's begin. Now I have my 19mm wrench, and then if I can get that on, then I have my 19mm on the bottom. If you don't have a 19mm, you can use a 3/4 with caution, because they are slightly different. Now I'm just going to get this snug, and then once I get the driver's side one in place, I'll go back with my torque wrench. That is just barely snug. I'm going to lower this the rest of the way on this side so that I can line up the driver's side now. Okay, now that's it. I am done with the installation of the drop kit spacers. The last thing that I have to do is I have to torque this down. Now the instructions recommend using the factory torque specifications, but the factory torque specifications apply for factory bolts with factory nuts. This nut and bolt were both replaced with the Toy Tech ones, which they recommend using 80 to 90 foot-pounds of torque. They also say that you can use your factory torque specs because they'll probably be about the same, but they don't mention what the factory torque specs are for each of the vehicles, the 4Runner, the Tacoma, and the FJ Cruiser. So I'm going to torque these down to 90 foot-pounds of torque, and then I'll be done with this installation, and then it is just putting the skid plates back on, which anybody can do that. And there was the click. So that's at 90 foot-pounds. And that's 90 foot-pounds. Now since I tightened this one could have shifted a little bit, so what I usually do is I go back and check. Okay, it's usually not advisable to have a ratchet aiming up towards your face, so the last thing you would want is this end to slip off and you punch yourself in the eye. Then you have kind of an interesting time explaining to your friends how you got a black eye and the funny story of how you gave yourself a black eye. So I'm going to keep this video going and I'm going to reinstall my skid plate, but for now, thanks for watching, and make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and God bless you guys. Now, according to the instructions, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to put the front skid plate back on, and you use the factory bolt that goes in, the front two factory bolts that go in here and here, and you use the rear two bolts that go in, that hold in the skid plate there and there, and you use those along with the long bolts and the spacers. My skid plate is a little damaged, so it's bent in and it actually bumps this whenever I try to slide it back on, which means I'm probably just going to end up cutting my front skid plate. But that's what you're supposed to do, is you're supposed to put the front two, the front two factory bolts in, and then the rear two newer bolts go in with the spacers on that factory skid plate. And in the rear, you do the opposite. You do the back is what bolts in where it's supposed to, and the front of the skid plate goes on with the washers there and there. They didn't send me a 12. This bolt that came with it, that I'm not sure if it's stainless steel or not, does not have a 12mm head. Looks to be maybe a 13. Okay, and that's it. Skid plate's on. Even though it's dented a little bit right there, it's actually not touching. So that is it. Until I cut my front skid plate so that it goes around this and this, I'm done. So that's all.